Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third and final day of Food Drink Europe's inaugural Food Drink Dialogues. Thank you so much for being here. I see a really full audience in the room and hopefully lots of people watching online. Today, we're delving into how to foster a competitive EU agri-food chain, looking particularly at investment and innovation. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Food Drink Europe for partnering with the Financial Times to organise this session. First, before we launch into the panel discussion, we have with us here Gelsomino Vigliotti, Vice President at the European Investment Bank. I'm just going to ask you a few questions to set the scene for particularly the investment side of this. Could you tell me a little bit, about the role of the European Investment Bank and how it plays in supporting agri-food competitiveness, particularly through investments and innovation?
Thank you very much for the invitation, and first of all, please let me say hello to some of the friends who participated with me under the leadership of the Commission on the high-level dialogue on agriculture, which was called by President von der Leyen past summer to put together around the table all the main stakeholders in this sector, which actually ran from the farmers to the young farmers, to the Commission, to the food representative of the industry, the representative of livestock, industry. So it was a great exercise, and all the NGOs that actually put on the table their interest. So, I want to do this introduction because to me, agriculture and bioeconomy and food processing is a sector which intersect many other areas. For the European Investment Bank, we are obviously dedicated to invest, but with particular objectives that are in particular attention to climate sustainability and cohesion. So also to work with the more remote areas where we know that farming it's an important sector there. Agriculture is not. We were always involved in agriculture financing since the start of our activities back in early '60s. But what was interesting last year is that with the new president, Nadia Calvino, we thought again on which were the priorities of the bank. And agriculture and bioeconomy was recognized as one of the 8 priorities for the bank. That means that we have to put much more attention to what and how we invest in agriculture and all in the supply chain, not only in the farming, but also in the processing and in the distribution. So we looked at what we did. Actually, we realized that almost 5 billion per year are invested in agri-food in the agri-food industry. Almost everything within the European Union, since we have also investment outside of the European Union. And actually also the bulk of this financing going to small and medium enterprises, because actually we have to remember that we are a public institution, and actually what we want is to go where there are a failure of the market or where there are financing gaps which are not being able to be covered by other type of finance because of the risk, because there are innovative processes, innovative ideas that maybe are too risky for commercial banks. So, it's again, we started from a sound basis, so we knew the sector. And what we are looking at, I don't know if I'm already going over my question, but if you allow, I can continue on this.
Well, I do want to come to SME and the particular support given to SMEs. I also wanted to talk about, why there was this refocus on the agri-food chain. You mentioned it was one of the 8 priorities, and whether that was anything to do with the growing need for resilience in this food chain as a result of climate change.
Absolutely. I think there are several reasons. Definitely, there is an issue related to, also to climate change, or if you like or not, to the idea, to the fact that anyway, the sector is very much under the pressure of extreme events which can affect the production and the resilience of the sector. But I think that there are also some political reason, I can say, because I think that, what was realized, and also looking what happens in the street of Brussels, and not only in Brussels, but also in other parts of Europe, is that maybe there are some sectors coming from remote areas in Europe that they feel not very well represented, or where their interests were not very well in represented. That's why I think that this a renewed focus on agriculture. It's because, I mean, there is the recognition that there are issues to be solved. And I think that there are also issues related to within the supply chain. One of the concern of the farmers is that maybe they are not sufficiently remunerated with respect to what the final client pay in the supermarket or whatever. So I think that there are issues that it's important to look at the value region, at the farming level, and at the distribution level. And what we want to do is mainly to support the SMEs. And that's why, for instance, our board of directors recently approved a lending envelope of 3 billion to be intermediated by banks, and mainly devoted to young farmers, to women, small and medium enterprises. And for the first time, we also will allow the acquisition of land. Acquisition of land was not an eligible asset for the bank, and we realized that to provide the opportunity to the ones that want to continue their activity, or that want to start their activity in farming, it's also important that we can finance the acquisition of land. And we are also, obviously, we are very much focused on innovation. We know everyone talks now about the gap that Europe has with respect to other parts of the world, and we know that there is a lot of innovation within the sector of food, agriculture, and we use different financial instruments. For instance, we use venture debt for those startups who actually are investing in pesticides which are not chemical, which invest in innovative way of irrigation, which invest in seeds which are resilient with respect to the extreme weather events. And in that regard, what we do is to provide a capital, which is we call it a patient capital, because I mean they do not have to repay the debt immediately or by paying interest, but they pay when they realize the profits that will allow them to repay back the debt. So, we try to tailor our financial instruments according to the needs of the final beneficiary. And also we have, and then I stop, and then we have also an indirect way to invest through the European Investment Fund. We invest in venture capital and private equity funds, and we know that there are an increasing number of funds investing in biotech, in Agrifood.
So you mentioned there was a gap. Do you think Europe is playing catch up a bit with other parts of the world in terms of the agri-food chain and innovation and efficiency? And do you think that the tools being used so far are helping to catch up the region with others?
I think that in agriculture, like in many other sectors in Europe, we have it's a great wealth of idea, of innovation, of startup. Actually, the number of startups in Europe, not only in the agriculture sector, it's very important. What we lack is the scale, the ability to scale up, the ability to grow. Also, I mentioned, venture capital fund. Also the Draghi report recognizes that in the end there aren't in Europe sufficient large funds who can invest to scale up these firms, and very often there are funds coming from the U.S. or other part of the world which acquire these firms. So what is needed? I think it's first of all, I mean, to invest more in the scale up, to ensure that what we invent, what we produce, it's as a scale large enough to serve a large market like Europe is. And then maybe that we need to have a more efficient use of of the public resources. No, I think that in the end we know that public resources are limited. They cannot be, and they will be unfortunately decreasing also for agriculture. I hope no, but it's. I don't think there will be a big increase of public resources devoted to the sector. So what we have to do is to leverage these resources, to use them in the way that can be multiplied. And actually, our role as a bank is that, to leverage on these resources. But I'm sure that also the Commission is thinking about instruments which can leverage the public resources. And I'm thinking in particular to risk management tools. We didn't talk about that, but we know that, for instance, now with the extreme weather events that we talked about, what is important is also to have available a system of insurance which is able to cope with all these events. And we know that also the insurance sector is, actually is looking into their ability to cope with all these events. So I think that, an issue that it's not only related to agriculture but to climate events in general is to think about risk management tools which will allow to have an insurance system which can cover everything. I think that, let me finish on that. Apologize. I know that I'm very long. But the final point is that we have also to avoid that farmers can think that through these instruments we want to favor, the financial industry or whatever. We have to give the right incentives to farmers, to provide them the right incentives to insure themselves and and to be safe about what can happen. So it's I think it's something on which we have to reflect, and I'm sure that the Commission is thinking about that also on the efficient use of resources.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. We have a great panel from across the agri-food chain, farmers, industry, and the Commission. So I think that we'll see whether they all agree on these points, on what's needed. But thank you for starting that off for us.
How are you? Very nice.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us on the stage. Could I ask you to introduce yourselves? Maybe we'll start with you, Catherine.
Okay, so good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me and joining this very nice event, Food Dialogue. This is just what we need. So I'm Catherine. I'm working at DG Agri, DG Agriculture and Rural Development. But as you know, we are not just interested, though we are interested in agriculture and farming, we're also very much interested in what the food chain is doing, and in particular the agri-food industry. So I'm responsible for well, I am in a team where we are working on what we call policy, strategy and policy analysis. And basically, concretely, what does it mean is that we've been supporting the strategic dialogue activities last year. We've been leading the work on the vision, the one that was published yesterday on agriculture and food, though I understand that food is not present enough, got the message. We are also assessing the performance of an important policy for the sector, which is the Common Agricultural Policy, and I see that Sophie was there with us today. And we are preparing the next Common Agricultural Policy in the context of the new multi-annual financial framework. Maybe we'll have the opportunity to exchange on that. And last but not least, we are very much also looking, among other things, as how we can use better data in our sector and how digitalization can help us to do a better job in delivering, our food, but also being more competitive and resilient.
Brilliant, thank you, Peter.
Yes, also thank you very much for the invitation from my side, of course. I'm Peter Mededorp. I'm a young farmer from the Netherlands, from the northern part, where I grow with my family starch potatoes, sugar beets, hemp, onions, wheat, and barley. And next to that, I have the honor of being the president of the European Council of Young Farmers, which is the umbrella organization of National Young Farmers Organization. We have 33 members in the EU member states and Serbia and the United Kingdom. And I'm also very happy to be here to talk with the processing side of the value chain on how do we make sure that my members can make the next steps when it comes to investment, when it comes to added value creation, because that has to be done in the value chain, and how we then can remunerate that to pay for the investment that are needed. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Sibel.
Thank you so much for inviting us over. So my name is Sibel Buik. I'm the Vice President, Legal and Corporate Affairs for AB InBev. And who is AB InBev? This may be a corporate name that doesn't ring a bell for everyone here in the room, but you will know us for our most beloved brands that we have internationally. So for Belgium, it's for sure Stella Artois, Jupiler, Leffe, Hoegaarden. Internationally, think about Corona, Budweiser, or for example, for Oktoberfest, Spaten, Löwenbräu. So we are present in 150 markets across the world, but our roots are really European. It goes back to the 13th century, and we have been here for a long time, also building Belgian beer as a brand across the world. And in my function, of course, what I do is translating the European regulatory framework into a business context and trying to explain that to our business and how to implement that, but also explain challenges and opportunities. And so happy to have the opportunity to discuss this today.
Thank you, Silvio.
Hi everyone, I'm Silvio Popovic. I'm the CEO of Europe, Middle East and Africa for PepsiCo. And I want here to represent the position of PepsiCo as an agro-food company. I mean, few of you know that we source crops from 800 farmers across Europe, around 35 crops, the main ones being potatoes, corn, oats, sunflower, and corn. No? So we are a big agro company that with very big businesses all across the world, and here in Europe, more than 11,000 associates and 26 factories. Very happy to be here.
Thank you, and Jasmina, we've already been introduced. Before we move on to the policy part of this, I just want to do some taking stock. It's been quite a turbulent 5 years or so. We had COVID, the war in Ukraine, big shifts in agri-commodity markets. Sibel and Silvio, if you could maybe talk us through some of the challenges to competitiveness in the agri-food industry that you've seen arise or deepen in the last few years. What's the situation looking like for you at the moment?
Yeah, thank you. I think indeed, as you mentioned, we have just coming out of an era of polycrisis, right? With the different things you mentioned from COVID, Ukraine, the rising prices for energy and commodities, which was, of course, a big challenge for our industry, agri-food industry. Many challenges. I think we have shown a lot of resilience throughout the past years, but let's be honest, we didn't recover from everything yet. So there is still a recovery ongoing. And on top, I think what we have seen is for the food security and food stability and have sustainable food systems, we need to adapt over and over to be able to go through this type of challenges. And is Europe ready enough for another type of series of crises? And I think that is important that when we think about a regulatory framework, that we already take this into account from a competitiveness perspective, because we want to make sure that we can continue to feed the full population in Europe with good food and good beverages. And if I look back to some of the things that are on the table, there is, from a regulatory perspective, there are some, we really support and applaud everything around the Green Deal and the ambitions that have set forward. We just need to find the balance in the implementation. I think it's good to make sure that we are less dependent from certain energy sources. It's good that we reduce our energy consumption as well. So we are fully aligned with all those ambitions, but we need to make sure that the companies can also go through that transition as well. Not only agriculture, of course, raw materials. As you mentioned, also beer is made of natural ingredients, so we need to foster those good raw materials, but also the manufacturing companies need to go through this full transition as well. So that cannot be taken out of the equation. And then secondly, I think from a compliance perspective, we have seen a lot of new regulation regarding reporting. And reporting can make sense if we collect data. You were referring to data, and I think it's important to have data, but it cannot create too much burden. We do see some advantages of CSRD, for example, because it will help us to benchmark us against our peers. It will help us to identify some gaps. It will also tell us where we are doing, where we are pioneering or where we are front runners, but we can also learn from each other. But we really need to strike that balance between reporting and the resources that go into, whereas the resources that are needed to drive the impact, because in the end, that's what we want to be, right? We want to make change, we want to go to transition, so we need to balance the resources that need to go on the measurement part, but also in the action part. So that's something we really need to manage very well.
Sylvia, would you agree on
yeah,
these
of course,
points?
it's, I think wrote a very good point, but I'll start from praising the industry and the whole agro-system for what happened in the last 5 years. I mean, the resilience of the food sector through the COVID was extraordinary, no? And then we end up with the energy crisis and everything with supply chain issues coming from the war in Ukraine and so on, and still the industry navigated through this. And now we're going through this huge inflation, which is stabilizing now. And of course, the high cost and so on, it's still a problem. But you need to say that the whole food system is strong. And I'll argue that we produce the best quality food in the world. We're also saying that actually we export a lot, and the system exports $70 billion of product. So it is competitive. Now, can it be even more competitive? And I think it's absolutely, it can. If you look at just to build on Sibel's point, so last week, Mario Draghi wrote an article in Financial Times, and he was quoting a number from IMF that the internal burden on manufacturing sector, it's equivalent of 40% tax on manufacturing sector and 110% tax on service sector. Now, the 40% tax, it's a lot, right? Imagine that we can reduce this, and this is coming from the legislation, administrative burden, and so on, and the bureaucracy and red tape, and all together sum up, and the fact that the full market, the one market is not fully working. So if we just work at reducing this can increase the competitiveness, right? And the industry is facing the same challenge like majority of the other industry, like very high energy prices, the highest in the world. And we are encouraged by the fact that the energy challenge is mentioned in the Compass document. So we hope that we'll see something coming. There are some specific things that we can do better. And we discussed for large. We're also encouraged by the fact that simplification on reporting, it's on the discussion. The way that we looked at the whole value chain to have a fair distribution of value across the value chain. So it's in order to support better the farmer, we have to support the whole value chain. And by the way, the food industry is processing 70% of the agro inputs. So if you want to support the farmers, you have to support the whole sector, so then the value can flow through up to the value chain. And the relationship between the retailers and suppliers, it's an old topic, and actually so old that the Commission came with a directive around unfair trading practices several years ago. But the way that this is applied across countries and across countries, it's suboptimal. There is a threshold that is only for applying for small companies below 350 million. This is very, very low threshold. All companies should be treated fairly, not only the small ones, right? And also there is also a question about there is no mechanism for cross-border reinforcement of the legislation. that it will be welcome, and also that it applies only for actually food and drink, which I think all suppliers should be treated fairly, not only the one in the beverage industry.
Lots of food for thought there. I just want to pick up on one point you mentioned. You said to support the farmer, you have to support the whole value chain. Peter, what do you think about this? You know, what are the barriers that farmers, and in particular young farmers, face, and how do those impact the competitiveness of the whole agri-food value chain?
Yes, so if you look at the competitiveness report of Draghi, agriculture specifically was not mentioned. For us, that was also a bit of a missed opportunity, because we see the fact that young farmers are not entering the sector or deciding not to take over farms as a threat to competitiveness of the agricultural sector. Specifically in certain regions, when you talk about the pigs and poultry, but also the dairy sector, you see lots of production because young farmers don't want to take over. And one of the big reasons why they don't want to take over is because the moment they step into the farm, the investment that are needed on that particular farm, both to keep competitive and to comply to animal welfare legislation, CO2 legislation, is incredibly high. Access to finance is really a problem for young farmers, and there we see also a very big responsibility of the rest of the value chain to help young farmers being able to make the next step to build that barn, to comply to the CO2 regulation, to comply to animal welfare standards, because otherwise, well, they simply leave the sector and are not coming back. We see a lot of opportunity in horizontal, but also vertical cooperation in the value chain. I think the vision is also opening up opportunities for that through sustainability agreements. But we need the rest of the value chain for that, to make sure we can. We are not the only ones who carry the risk of the investment that need to be taken.
Jasmine, anything to come back on that? Access to finance is a big problem for farmers, and the burden, the risk burden, falls too heavily on farmers.
I tend to agree with what has been said. I forgot to mention one thing that I think it's important. It's the reference here of what within the supply chain can be done to support. But for instance, what we can do as investment bank is to support our financial intermediaries that provide finance to farmers. For instance, with advisory products, to support them in saying, okay, you can want to access this lending at more favorable terms. So what you have to do is this and that, so that they can develop together the right instruments. But definitely, I agree that the access to finance is constrained, and that's why the role of a public institution like us is to make this finance more available and at better terms, because in the end, the burden shouldn't be all on farmers.
If we could turn to the did you have something to say, Peter?
Yeah, I wanted to add upon that. That is also the reason why we're very happy that the European Investment Bank comes with this loan for the agricultural sector, also tailored to young farmers. So I think we're starting making steps in the right direction.
Okay, great. Catherine, if we could look at the vision now, how is this going to help competitiveness across the value chain?
Yeah. So maybe building on what has already been said, because of course I will talk about the vision, but I think that you've mentioned the recent communication of the Commission on the competitiveness compass, which I think is important to the sector. And the agri-food sector is explicitly mentioned in this communication. And I think it is important to recognize that, for many years, on this competitiveness agenda, sometimes, we tended to forget a bit that this sector needs investment to be more competitive, to become more resilient and sustainable, and that's for us very important. The vision is a different category of communication, I would say. What is it about? So this vision that we published yesterday has built, as it was mentioned, on the outcome of the strategic dialogue. but not only, on many other input that we've received in different reports, Draghi, Letta, Ninisto, but also the input we've received from the EU institution and exchange and dialogue that we've had over the last months. And here the objective is not to build a kind of a new action plan, maybe in the vein of the Farm to Fork strategy, where we say this is what we are going to do with targets, deadlines, and look guys, now you're going to deliver that. It's a different spirit, mindset that we have here. What we wanted to say is that, first of all, recognize, maybe you will think that's not a lot, I would say it's a lot, that this sector is really strategic. Strategic for the economic security of Europe, for our security. Strategic also in terms of the prosperity it brings to the European Union. I don't give the figures because you have that in mind. I don't need to do that. Strategic also for the impact it can have, and the positive or negative impact it can have on the environment and climate. And this sector holds many of the solutions that we need to find and implement and deploy, to protect our natural resources and our climate. So this is the first important element in this vision. And that's what you find in the first chapter, basically. The second important thing with this vision is that it's not a final product, it's a starting point, meaning that we are sharing with you, the stakeholders, the vision that we have of this sector in 2040. You may partially disagree, maybe totally disagree, but we are interested to continue the conversation here with you on that vision. I think that we've built very much on the outcome of the strategic dialogue, that I would be surprised if people would say, this is all wrong, but let's also engage here. It's a starting point to have a conversation on this, the vision, how we see the sector, how we want together to build the sector that we dream about in 2040 for our prosperity, competitiveness, resilience. And then we identify a couple of policy areas, domains in which we think it is important to work together to make this sector more competitive and more resilient. And that's where obviously you may say that here and there are good points. We may have missed a couple of others, but we stand ready to engage there, and we want to engage and shape together what we are going to do in the coming years. And we are starting now. We have already started in a way, and the EIB has already started. I had not wait for us to deliver this vision. They have already started, and they played a very important role in our strategic dialogue. And basically, this is what we are going to do in the coming weeks and months to build with you the agenda for the sector.
That sounds like an invitation to me. Can I ask the rest of the panel what's missing from the vision, and particularly from the food side of this? It's quite strong on agriculture. I think you mentioned yourself, Catherine, that and a little bit thinner on the food end. Sylvia, perhaps you could talk a bit to that. What do you think's missing, and what would you like to see in terms of EU policy pushing competitiveness in the sector?
So first, we are very encouraged by the fact that the food is mentioned. Right? By 5 years ago, it was not the food industry was not mentioned. So we're making great progress, and I fully agree with you. There is a different tone and a different level of conversation. Of course, because this is just at the beginning, we hope that it will be concrete actions around the food industry will be clearly articulated into the vision action plan as we go forward. It will be a missed opportunity, not to say. But
and what would you like to see incorporated? Anything specific?
The basic thing, like Sibyl said, the simplification of regulation, removing of red tape, standardization of the legislation when it goes to application in every market, which is a big challenge. And actually, if you look at the report of, I think, Letta report, another Italian report, right? Italians are big now and lately with big thinking. So they called out the fact that there is a legislation framework, but then when it's applied in every single market, it's applied in a different way, which practically you end up with 27 different regulations that you have to adjust in a single market. So standardization of this across the market, it will be a big unlock. And of course, like everything else, how do we facilitate investment in the sector so we can generate, build more factories, hire more people, do more R&D and so on, just to generate more growth.
Anyone have anything to add to that or come
Yes.
back on?
Yes.
Catherine, quickly, and then we'll come to...
Maybe just to, because
Just quickly, yeah.
what I've heard, but what I've heard is that we need concrete action, and I agree with you. We need to have a conversation, to talk to each other. That's very important. And it's not but, and we need action. And we need the conversation to make sure that we get it right on the action. So for me, it's clear. When it comes to red tape simplification, this is very high on the agenda of the Commission. You've seen that. There is soon there is a first simplification package that will come for the reporting obligation, which of course is going hopefully to help you. We will have in Q2, probably around April, a simplification package on the CAP legislation for farmers. That's very important. And in the vision, we announced that at the end of the year, we would like to also have another simplification package outside the CAP, because we are not going to change the CAP every month, that wouldn't be serious, but on the other legislation that have an impact on the sector. And that includes, obviously the environmental, the health legislation that affect farmers, but also the agri-food industry. So use that as an opportunity to help us to build, this simplification. The second element is investment. It's crucial. This commission, I'm quoting the president of the European Commission, is an investment commission. So let's work on that. And there are many hooks that you can use in the vision to say, look, farmers are important. We need to invest in farming, but this is not just about farming. This is also the industry. And the last point is about innovation. Here we need to create, I think, to do a better job, to create an environment which is much more, let's say, facilitating, innovation and getting access to innovation much easier, in a much easier way than we used to do that. Not at the expense of health, not at the expense of environment, not at the expense of the individual choices that people can make, consumers can make, and so on and so forth. So market approval legislation, innovative technologies, and so on and so forth. We need to look here into the details of the regulation where we can do a better job so that it doesn't, as an example, it doesn't take 7 or 10 years to have a market approval for a food additive, for a pesticides, or NGTs, maybe.
Yes, thank
basically.
You. Sibel, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate what you just already clarified. I think to build on what Silvio just said, indeed, first of all, around different the member states with the transposition of the regulation, we need to make sure it's standardized and there is like no gold plating. Things need to be the level playing field for all companies. I think when there is new regulation that need to be drafted, it's very important that there needs to be a competitiveness check, meaning not only within Europe, but also how do we position ourselves towards the rest of the world. Certainly for global companies as ours, it needs to be competitiveness, and also when decisions are made about investments, this is very important. What is also important is that the different DGs talk more about food and agriculture and think about the connections between different regulatory proposals, that they are also not conflicting, for example, in some of the evidences or the reporting that needs to be done, that it is also standardized and aligned so that we don't need to differentiate certain data that need to be listed, that it is similar and in the same way. We see sometimes that they don't talk to each other, so very important to continue to have that conversation. I think it's very important that you continue to engage with us, with the federations, with the companies. I think there are very good intentions when new regulatory initiatives are taken, but sometimes there are unintended consequences, and therefore you need the expertise of the companies and the federations to highlight it's a good thing you do, but think about the negative consequence about something. And I think we have an example of packaging waste regulation, for example, where due to technical wording, the most sustainable packaging, kegs for beer, is not part anymore of that reuse target. So therefore, it's important to continue to have the conversation with the companies to also that we can highlight certain of those misalignments in the wording.
Thank you, Peter. Sorry, you.
Yes, maybe also good to highlight in this context of what you just have been addressing, the both of you, on standardization of regulation from the government side. Something what I think from the farming side also is important to highlight is that a lot of the legislation is being implemented now through the value chain. Looking at CSRD legislation, for example, it's the bigger guys in the value chain who have the responsibility to start to make this reporting and to report on the emissions in their value chain. A lot of the time, the biggest emissions are at the farm. So something we are seeing, and a conversation we have to get started as well on the European level, is how do we deal with the different reporting obligations from the different actors in the value chain from a farmer perspective? Because our processes are starting with reporting obligations, asking farmers to report on this and this and this. The same seeing with banks, the same with insurance companies. Supermarkets are also having concentrating on their own hotspots, all coming with documents to the farm. Can you please fill in this and this and this on your sustainability? Where a bank can be focusing on the pesticide use, the plant protection product use, while processors can focus on no-till, no plowing. Sometimes there are trade-offs between these kind of requests. And we need also an holistic approach towards this reporting obligation. I think the problem setting in the vision on generational renewal is very good with the access to land, with the access to finance, but the vision also very clearly says that we're not going to leave the goals and the ambitions we have behind. So this is not going away. We see that the Commission is more and more implementing legislation, so to say, via the value chain. When we talk about carbon credits, well, nature credits is now something new. We still have an ETS in the air. The CSRD legislation is not going away completely. Maybe it's going to be simplified, but it's not going away. At the end, this is all coming at the farm. We should make sure as well that this is not overburdening the farm, not just by governmental legislation, but also what is coming from the market. We need to start to have a conversation about this as well.
Thank you, Peter. I think we'll come back to green transition and what farmers need to implement that. I just wanted to pick up on something briefly that Sibel said about, the position of European companies in the rest of the world, because I think it's hard for us to talk about competitiveness without taking into consideration the global landscape, how Europe is competitive on a global scene. And we have seen some big shifts, particularly in the US. There's been a focus away from sustainability, away from regulation, more on growth. Where does that leave the European agri-food sector, and where does it leave global players such as yourselves who operate in both markets? I don't know if someone wants to Jasmine, if you wanted to talk about, how geopolitics is affecting the agri-food sector's competitiveness in Europe.
No, I think that Catherine mentioned at the very beginning that Europe is very well aware of the geopolitical context in which we live in, starting from the invasion by Russia of Ukraine and all the repercussions that were on the agri-system in Europe and outside of Europe. I understand that there are also concern about its opening of some markets outside of the European Union, and there I think that it's important to clearly understand what is at stake, what is the reality, and what are maybe some fake news that sometimes go around. But I understand, the concern of the ones that produce and are, it's constrained by all this red tape and all these environmental constraints, and that maybe they fear that, products coming from other parts of the world, they can escape from this. So I think that we have to be sure that what we agree upon, is based on a fair basis. If you allow me, I want to come back on the food processing, but maybe I'm deviating.
We'll come back to that. I wanted to sort of hear from the industry about your thoughts on the geopolitical changes that we've seen and how those impact you, and how that impacts competitiveness.
First, we don't know yet, and second, I think what I said in the beginning, we should be focused on what we can control and not what we cannot control. We can control how we organize ourselves in Europe and how we make this sector more competitive. The rest we let it to the...
For example, so PepsiCo has already rolled back some of its diversity and inclusion policies as a result of the change in administration in the US. What does this, is sustainability and climate goals next, or does the company remain committed to those?
I say first on the inclusion, we want to believe that we are a people-centric company, the same like we want to be consumer-centric and customer-centric. And whatever happens in the US, it's kind of a US issue. Will continue to be people-centric.
And in terms of the sustainability and climate goals?
The sustainability and climate goals, it's an area that we are very passionate about. By the way, we made a lot of progress, and we are very proud of the progress made either for product sustainability or the value chain decarbonization or regenerative agriculture. And I have to mention also that Europe is leading, not just my company, our sector, Europe sector in PepsiCo, but in general, the industry is leading in the world, right? And a lot of the companies here in the industry are making tremendous progress, which is actually a very good point. I think we'll continue to, decarbonization needs doesn't go anywhere. I think we still have to make sure that we look after the future generations and so on. So the rest are American politics that I'm not going to comment.
Okay, and just to open that up to the rest of the panel, how do we balance, the need for competitiveness in the sector with the, the sustainability goals that are clearly important in terms of the sector's longevity, as Sylvia mentioned, for future generations to continue to have a sustainable, viable agricultural sector, they're necessary. But how do you balance that with competitiveness?
Well, if I may, I don't know whether I would use the word balance.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that at least that's the ambition. In the vision, we have a dynamic trade agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So we think that Europe is a big, player, a major global player, and we aim at supporting the sector to continue to be, a big exporter. We are a net exporter of food, and we think that this is creating a lot of value and prosperity in Europe. So basically, the trade agenda is dynamic, meaning that we think that we need to continue to have a bilateral agreement and diversify also our commercial partners in the world, open up markets for our companies, so that's very important. Of course, we recognize, we've heard also what some of you have said, including the farming sector, that we need also to do a better job when it comes to also protect our production in Europe. So you will notice in the vision that we have also indicated that we are ready to explore and take action on a couple of elements, including changing regulation, where we, let's say, find better fairness in terms of the competition. It doesn't mean reducing the level of our standards, but recognizing that sometimes we are importing products that are not fully compliant with all our standards. Yeah. I mean, they are complying with, our food safety rules, for sure, because that we don't compromise. But we can't say that they are always fully compliant, in terms of all the standards that we are imposing to our producers. And we are ready to look at that, for example, on the pesticides residues, on animal welfare, and so on and so forth, to make the competition a bit, I would say, fairer.
Jasmine, you had something you wanted to add, and Sibel, then we'll come to you, sorry.
No, I mean, on this trade-off of sustainability and competitiveness, I don't believe that there is a real trade-off. I mean, let's think about their industries, So they use a lot of glass. And we know that, for instance, glass is one of the most, the glass industry is one of the most energy-intensive industry. And actually, for instance, we financed recently, I think it was in France, a lot of investment to reduce the absorption of energy in this type of industry, as well as on innovation, on digitalization. We didn't talk about digitalization. I think that there are many investments that are important to remain competitive, but at the same time that ensure that you can stay, that you are more sustainable because you use less energy and you are more energy efficient. So I think that, also this trade-off between sustainability and competitiveness to be, looked at through the right lens.
Okay, thank you, Sibel.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I don't think we should look as a trade-off. I think, in the 70s, it was all about shareholder value. Today is about stakeholder value. Now that you have to deliver for shareholders, you have to decarbonize your thing, you have to work for communities, you have to make sure that your employees are engaged and so on. So yes, it is more difficult than before, but it's also the right thing to do. And from simple example on energy, you put solar panel and you have free energy after 6 years. So, okay, so some of the sustainable investments are going to pay back. On this journey, long-term, I think sustainability investment will pay back. On the journey, there are bumps. And this is where we need to co-create with the Commission to find ways how to invest to remove the bottlenecks. And then long-term, the saying, actually, we have experience with regenerative agriculture practices with the same yield or improved yield. But the adoption of this, and when you get the comfort that you can generate the same yield and the same cost per hectare, takes time, and we have to learn, and we have to experiment again. And the testing circle is long, it's 1 year. And then you learn, and then you course correct, and so on. So my point is that we need to embrace the end. And actually, I think it will be good if we embrace it together. So it's not only let's make the food more safety, but also let's make it also competitive in the same time. So we don't put a regulation without looking at the cost to the business of that regulation and find a way to progress, but also do it in a competitive way.
Great, thank you. That's really interesting, well-made point. Sibel, if you wanted to...
Yeah, it's the power of the and. I fully agree. And sustainability is not a separate strategy for us. It's ingrained in our overall strategy. And then coming back to competitiveness and innovation, maybe just to make that point, we have a lot of smart people in Europe with a lot of smart ideas. We just need a bit of more smarter regulation to get those innovations quicker to market and to be able to scale them up. You were already referring to this long period that it takes for innovation. But if you really want to, and we have hurdles indeed on our sustainability journey. Some things are easy to fix, like renewable energy. We have already 100% renewable electricity for all our beers in Europe. But there are other things, sustainability challenges, that we don't have the answer yet. So what we do at AB InBev, for example, is to launch a 100% accelerator program. We started that in 2018. We have very specific sustainability issues for our industry that we couldn't find an answer to. We did a call towards the startups, like, do we have already an idea that potentially could help us? And then what we do is help them getting over certain technical issues with our R&D team, is bringing in some finance, but also giving our supply chain say like, okay, when this is mature, we will be your first client for a long time, so you're sure that you have like the market that is ready for you. But to get some of those new products into the market, it's sometimes a very long process. And I think if we really want to be competitive for the long term and really like accelerate growth in Europe, that is something that really needs to be fixed next to funding. I think that part really needs to be solved.
Innovation, investment, and speed. There are so many more things I think we could talk about. I wanted to come back to the green transition, but I do just want to give the audience the opportunity to ask some questions. Does anyone have a question? Yes, here. Where's the mic is coming to you.
So, do I need to stand?
If you like.
Bart van de Water from Nestlé. So, first of all, Katrien, well done for landing the vision. And as you said, we will build on it. And maybe start from a perspective of the soil. Because that's, I would have dreamed, honestly, probably it was, that regenerative agriculture would be more recognized in the vision. It didn't happen, but I think there is another disappointment that I have, that the centrality of the soil health is not enough highlighted in my view in the vision, and it can be done and course corrected in my view, because if you link it up then with what Peter was saying, because our common challenge with Peter is really the scope 3, the value chain emissions. And I believe if we use the centrality of soil, which has lots of benefits, because you have the short and the long term. You have nature and you have farmer income. And soil health is also the centrality of regenerative agriculture. So I think if we bring those elements together, link them with the benchmarking system, so that farmers have a clear cockpit. Peter, you said this before. I think this would be great, and then we link it to really payment. And this is where we can start to pool also the resources, public, private, and have like one direction. So I would really call for that.
Any response from?
Yeah, well, I can just, I can only concur with you. I'm an agronomist, so when you're talking about soil, I just love what you said. Obviously, you're right. Regenerative agriculture is not mentioned, but there are many other forms of agriculture which are not mentioned. But what we, of course, we didn't want to make a long list of all the good practices and good production systems that exist. There are many, but we thought about regenerative agriculture. And we have enough in the vision to work together and see how, you know, with what you have already started to do with regenerative agriculture, which is very good in terms of not only the, let's put it that way, the improvement of the health of the soil, but also better remunerating the farmers, supporting them, advising them, supporting their investments so that they deliver better in terms of productivity, fertility, they get a better price, you get also better results in your Scope 3 report. So all that is a virtuous cycle. So we just need to see how we can do a better job in terms of, for example, the benchmark sustainability or the sustainability compass, as we've called it, whatever the name is, which is about how can we make sure that we provide everybody in the food chain, starting with the farmers, with the tools to, you know, have a better knowledge of their awareness of their performance, can compare, but also can use that to build market-based incentives so that we better reward, you know, the farmers who are doing a great job. So basically, this is all about that, and let's shape that together. This section on the sustainability compass is not, you know, too detailed. It's about a working method. It's working with you. We don't want to create, I'm going to say it, don't quote me, another administrative monster there. We want to build something starting with what exists already and see how we can use that as a way to facilitate the life of the farmers, your life, and making sure that we can speak the same language across the food chain.
Thank you. Can it be time for another question? Yes, one here. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Tiffany and I represent Yara International. We're producing fertilizers. The discussion started here about the fact that we can scale up and speed up all the innovations. And if we do so, then we also kind of square the circle in terms of competitiveness. And my question is to you, Catherine, and to you, Peter. From what we know well at Yara, we know that precision farming can help tremendously to reduce nutrient losses, and that low-carbon fertilizers can help to reduce the carbon footprint of our daily bread. How can policy incentives, so to you, Catherine, be suggested in that line to really upscale the potential? And to you, Peter, what you and your fellow young farmers would need to be able to tap into these innovations?
We got 3 minutes, so can pithy.
This perfectly fits into this entire access to innovation and access to finance perspective of what young farmers need. This precision farming, it requires huge investment into tractors, into machinery, a certain scale, and I think that is where we really have to work on.
Very good. And maybe to say that you have a couple of suggestions in the vision, which are indicated on which we can work, and maybe an opportunity for me to say that that comes back to a comment that you made, which is it's not DG Agri doing everything, but we want to work with the other DGs, work together. So I'm now, you know, making sure that when, for example, next time when we meet, you don't just meet with DG Agri, but you have around the table also DG Grow, DG Climate, and so on and so forth, so that we have an integrated approach. That's also all about the vision.
I think we possibly have time for one more question, if there is one. Dirk, yes.
Thank you very much, Dirk Jacobs, Director General of FoodDrinkEurope. Welcome here on behalf of FoodDrinkEurope. a very interesting discussion. And I think the first comment I'd like to make is that we should also not forget that Europe has actually quite good conditions if you look at the social conditions that we have, the economic conditions, the infrastructure. So we tend to be quite negative sometimes when we talk about lack of investment and speed and innovation, but we are already quite at a good level. But that is not to say that things cannot be improved. And I think a key objective, I think, for us all is to see how can the investment conditions to invest in Europe be improved. And we've recently done a survey that will come out very soon across business leaders, across the food industry, small and large companies, and it shows that Europe is no longer the desired investment location. It's North America, it's China, other places. So I think the objective is to create a more attractive farming and food sector and create the conditions for us to really to profit. And I think that's leading me to the question that I would have for the panel. So we're talking about competitiveness of the agri-food chain, the agri-food sector. What is the KPI? How will we measure the success in 2040? Katrien, you mentioned the vision is talking about 2040. What is a competitive, resilient food chain in 2040?
Can we start at this end, maybe, Jasmine? Or you can pass the buck along the line if you want.
KPI.
You know, maybe not as a president of the European Investment Bank, but as a European citizen. I think that in 2040, I would like to have the same quality, if not better quality, of our food and farm products. That we have much more people working in agriculture with very good conditions, and that we can compete with other part of the world. So,
Silvio or Sibel, if you wanted to add anything to that, what's the KPI for 2040?
Yeah, I think just to build on Dirk's comment is, what is our source of competitive advantage? And it is the people that we have. We have a very skilled labor. We just have to unlock this potential of everyone in Europe, right? And build on it. And create an environment that every citizen can be him or herself and have a great job and have a great family and things. So you look at this vision that you have to eat better, live better, and it's all coming together, and you can have this in Europe. We just have to unleash the potential of Europe, right?
Okay. Anyone else, if you have anything to add?
I think the potential is indeed the thing to focus on. We have high potential, but also people, we have smart people. We need to make sure that we can come with creative innovations to make us, as Europe, more competitive around the world, but also fair pricing for the full value chain.
Okay. And final comments from anyone? How do you unleash the... Yes, but how do you also think, in your answer, we need to address slightly, how do you unleash the potential? How do you bring back in the investment that Doug talked about? How do you...
1 minute.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I'll give you two. I'll give you two.
No, but I will answer the other question because I like it very much. And I was thinking in 2040, if you could launch again, this survey, and that you have a totally different result, which is basically where you see that, the food companies are saying, well, though we continue to invest, in emerging and countries where we can, of course, there is a lot of growth, we recognize that there is still a lot of attractiveness, and our investment also, when we are thinking about investing, we are looking at Europe still as a good place to invest and have a good return.
I think you answered both questions. Well done. Yeah.
Good.
Just to finish off, Peter, any thoughts on this from the farmer's point of view?
Yeah, for us, the KPI would definitely be enough young farmers in 2040 to keep the sector resilient and competitiveness, that young people still are willing to enter the sector. I think that's very important. And that's something the entire value chain should be working on.
Well, I think that brings us slightly over time, but I think there's a really interesting discussion, which I have the feeling we could have continued much longer, which is always a sign of an interesting conversation. So thank you very much to all our panelists, and again to Food Drink Europe for hosting this. It's been a really great event, I think.